They showed up at my door with soft voices and familiar smiles, saying they heard my wife and I bought a penthouse and wanted to move in to make peace. What they didn't say was how quickly peace turns into control, and how easily family can cross lines you never imagined needing to defend. I stayed quiet longer than I should have. If you've ever faced a moment like that, you'll understand why this story still sits with me. They arrived earlier than expected. I was still rinsing rice at the sink when the doorbell rang, sharp and impatient, the way it always rang when my daughter felt certain the door would open for her. My wife was at the table sorting mail, glasses low on her nose, humming under her breath. Nothing about that afternoon felt unusual yet. When I opened the door, my daughter stepped in first, already talking, already moving as if the space belonged to her. "We were in the area, Dad. Thought we'd stop by." Her husband followed, smiling too quickly, his eyes scanning past me into the living room. They both looked comfortable. Too comfortable. We sat down for dinner like we always did. Plates passed, small talk floated. Work, traffic, someone they knew who'd moved to Florida. I listened more than I spoke. I always had. Years of management taught me that silence made people reveal more than words ever would. Halfway through the meal, my daughter leaned back in her chair, fork resting on the edge of her plate. "So, we heard you and Mom bought a penthouse." My wife looked up, surprised. "Heard from who?" "People talk, Mum, especially when something big changes." Her husband nodded, folding his napkin with care. "It's impressive, really. A big step, at your age." The words sounded polite. The meaning wasn't. I felt my jaw tighten, but kept chewing. Years ago, I learned that reacting too fast only gave others control. "We were thinking," my daughter continued, "that with something like that, it might be a lot for you both to manage alone." "A lot how?" I asked. She waved a hand, casual. "Bills, appointments, paperwork, decisions, things that get harder." My wife's hand paused mid-air. She set her fork down slowly. "I manage just fine." Her husband leaned forward. "Of course you do. We're not saying you don't. Just that sometimes people don't realize when they need help." The room went quiet. Not the awkward kind, the dangerous kind. I looked at my wife. Her shoulders stiffened, eyes fixed on the table. I recognized that posture. She wore it the day the doctor spoke too fast and too soft, assuming I'd translate bad news into something gentler. She wore it when people talked around her instead of to her. "What are you really saying?" she asked. My daughter exhaled, as if burdened by honesty. "Mum, don't make this harder. We just want to make sure things are handled properly."
"You've had moments lately."
"Moments?" "Forgetting names, misplacing things. You got confused at the pharmacy last month." That wasn't confusion. That was a cashier who wouldn't listen. I felt heat rise in my chest, my hands clenched under the table. "That happens to everyone," I said. "Not everyone your age, Dad." Her husband added softer. "We're family. It's our responsibility to step in before something goes wrong." Responsibility. The word hung there like a verdict. My wife's voice dropped. "Are you suggesting I can't make decisions for myself?" No one answered right away. That was answer enough. I could have stood up, could have shut it down, could have told them to leave.
Instead, I did what I'd always done. I stayed quiet. I told myself it was for peace, for family, for my wife. Dinner ended early. Plates scraped, chairs pushed back.
They hugged my wife longer than necessary, kissed my cheek with the familiarity of people who knew they'd crossed a line and expected forgiveness anyway. "We'll talk more about it soon," my daughter said at the door. "Just think about it." When the door closed, the house felt smaller. My wife gathered the plates without a word. I followed her to the kitchen, watched her rinse dishes that were already clean. Water ran longer than it needed to. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded. "Too fast." "I'm tired." That was all she said. Later, I stepped outside onto the porch. The evening air carried the sound of a neighbour's lawnmower, distant laughter from down the block. Normal life continued, indifferent. I leaned against the railing and stared at the street. Cars passed. Lights flickered on in houses I'd driven past for decades. I thought about all the times I'd stepped aside so others could feel comfortable. All the meetings I'd absorbed blame in so my team wouldn't fracture. All the compromises I'd called love. Inside, I heard my wife moving around, the soft rhythm of someone trying to keep things steady. For the first time, a thought landed heavy and clear. Silence wasn't protecting us anymore. It was erasing us. I stayed there longer than necessary, listening to the house breathe, knowing that when I went back inside, nothing would look different, and yet something had already shifted in a way I couldn't undo. The phone didn't stop ringing the next morning, but none of the calls were from my daughter. Messages came from people who rarely checked in: church friends, an old co-worker, a neighbour who usually waved from across the street and kept walking. Each call carried the same careful tone, the kind people use when they think they're being helpful. "Just checking on you and your wife. Heard there might be some changes. Hope everything's okay at home." I answered politely, kept my voice even, offered nothing they could repeat. After the third call, I stopped picking up. Silence felt easier than correcting stories I hadn't told. At breakfast, my wife stirred her coffee without drinking it. She asked if I'd heard from our daughter. I shook my head and reached for the newspaper. The pages rustled louder than usual. "She'll cool off," my wife said, not quite convincing herself. I nodded, though doubt pressed against my ribs. I'd seen this pattern before. People rarely cooled off when they thought they were right. By the end of the week, calls turned into visits. A woman from our congregation stopped by with a casserole we hadn't asked for. She hugged my wife longer than needed. "If there's anything you need help with, dear, just say the word." Help. That word again. Later that afternoon, a man I'd known for years pulled me aside near the mailbox. "You know, folks worry when they hear things," he said, "about decision-making, about stress." "People hear what they want," I replied. He nodded but didn't argue. That worried me more than disagreement would have. I drove to the grocery store alone the next day, needing space where no one knew me as someone's father. In the parking lot, my phone buzzed. A voicemail from a number I recognized but hadn't heard from in years. Thomas Reed, a lawyer I'd worked with during a corporate restructuring long ago. "Call me when you have a minute," he said. "Just want to flag something." I waited until I got home. When I called back, he didn't waste time. "I'm hearing your name come up," he said. "Nothing official yet, just chatter. But chatter becomes paperwork faster than people think." "About what?" "About capacity. about who should be handling affairs if questions get raised. I leaned against the counter, listening. I'm not saying anyone's filed anything, Thomas continued. But when family members start framing concern a certain way, institutions listen. Institutions? Banks, doctors, courts. The word courts settled heavy. After the call, I stood there longer than needed, hands still wrapped around my phone. My wife walked in and asked who it was. I told her. She smiled thinly. I knew it, she said. I could feel it shifting. That evening she misplaced her keys and laughed it off, but the sound carried an edge. I offered to help look. She declined, found them on her own, and said nothing more. Pride runs deep in people who've had to defend it before. A few days later, a letter arrived from the bank, requesting a meeting to review account arrangements. No accusations, no demands, just an invitation. I drove there alone, sat across from a woman half my age who spoke carefully, as if reading from a script she hadn't written. This is routine, she said. When families grow, when assets change, we make sure everything's clear. Clear for whom? She paused. For everyone involved. On the way out, I called Thomas again. What should I be doing? Start by assuming no one else is protecting your interests, he said. Not out of malice, out of momentum. Momentum. That word stuck with me. At home, my wife folded laundry in the living room. I told her about the bank. She folded a shirt slower than the rest. I don't like feeling discussed, she said, like a problem to solve. Neither do I. We sat there in the quiet, television off, evening stretching on. Outside, a neighbour laughed on the phone. Inside, the house felt careful. The next Sunday we skipped church. I couldn't handle the looks. Instead, we walked the block, nodding at people who tried not to stare. Halfway around, my wife squeezed my arm. Do you think we did something wrong? I stopped walking. No. The answer came out sharper than I intended. She searched my face, then nodded and kept moving. That night, another voicemail arrived, this one from my daughter. We just want what's best, Dad. You don't have to shut us out. I didn't call back. I sat at the kitchen table instead, pen in hand, making a list I hadn't planned to write. Names, accounts, papers, places where decisions lived. The house was quiet, but not peaceful. From the hallway, my wife asked if I wanted tea. I said yes. She set the kettle on and waited for it to heat, standing there longer than necessary, as if listening for something to settle. I folded the list once, slipped it into a drawer, and reached for the phone again, dialing Thomas's number as the kettle began to whistle. The first time I heard it, it didn't come from family. It came from a stranger who had no reason to lie and no obligation to be careful. I was standing near the checkout at the hardware store, hands full of screws I didn't remember needing, when a woman leaned in and lowered her voice. I hope your wife is doing okay. I thanked her without asking why. Change can be hard, she added, especially when memory starts slipping. The word slipped landed wrong. I felt it in my chest before my mind caught up. I'm sorry, I said. She waved it off, embarrassed. Oh, I must have misunderstood. Someone mentioned... Never mind. She paid and left, the bell over the door chiming like nothing had happened. I stood there longer than necessary, staring at a rack of tape measures. When I got back to the truck, I sat with the door open, keys in my hand, wondering how a private thought could travel that fast. At home, my wife was on the phone. Her voice sounded tight, polite in the way people get when they're being cornered without proof. She hung up when she saw me. "Who was that?" I asked. "The clinic," she said. "They wanted to confirm some information." "What information?" She shrugged. "Emergency contacts, decision-making preferences." "Did you ask why?" "They said someone had called with concerns." The kitchen clock ticked louder than usual. I set the bag down and started unpacking screws I didn't need. "Who called?" "They wouldn't say." Later that afternoon, the bank called again. This time they asked to verify a change request that neither of us had made. I asked for details. The representative hesitated. "We received an inquiry from an authorized family member." Authorized. That word again, used like a blanket. "No changes are approved without us," I said. "Of course, sir. We just like to be proactive." Proactive felt a lot like invasive. I called my daughter. It went to voicemail. I texted instead, short and plain. "No accusations. We need to talk. Please don't make calls on our behalf." Hours passed. No reply. By evening, a pattern started to form. Small things, each easy to explain on its own, began to line up. A pharmacy refill that had been delayed. A message from our insurance provider asking to confirm consent. A neighbor who suddenly asked if my wife needed help getting to appointments. At dinner, my wife pushed food around her plate. "Am I forgetting things?" she asked quietly. I looked up. "What?" "People keep asking if I'm okay, if I'm confused, if I need help deciding things." "Do you feel confused?" She shook her head, then stopped, as if second-guessing herself. "Some days I'm tired. Some days I lose my train of thought. But that's not new." "No, it isn't." The doubt didn't vanish. It shifted, settled somewhere deeper. That night, I opened the file cabinet we hadn't touched in years. Old tax returns, warranties, birth certificates. I laid things out on the dining table and started sorting. Dates, names, who had access to what. I found notes from years ago, when my wife had insisted on handling our finances because she liked knowing where every dollar went. I made copies, slid originals back where they belonged, wrote down the names of people who had called and when, not out of paranoia, out of clarity. The next morning, I called the clinic myself. "I want to review my wife's records," I said. "Is she aware of this request?" "She's sitting next to me," the receptionist asked to put me on hold. When she came back, her tone had changed. "There's a note here requesting additional oversight." "From whom?" "A family member." "Remove it. I'll need authorization." "You already have it." Silence stretched. "I'll escalate this." Escalation sounded like delay, but it was something. By the end of the week, my daughter finally called. Her voice sounded practiced. "Dad, you're overreacting." "Then explain what's happening." "We're just trying to help. You're busy. Mom gets overwhelmed." "Overwhelmed by what?" "Decisions, details, life." "She's lived a full one," I said. "Longer than you." Her husband cut in on speaker, voice smooth. "No one's questioning her value, just capacity." "Capacity to do what?" I asked. "To manage everything alone." "She's not alone." A pause. "You don't see what we see," he said. then stop looking for problems that aren't there. We can't, Dad, not if something goes wrong. Nothing has, yet. The call ended without resolution. I didn't try again. Instead, I met Thomas at a cafe near his office. He listened without interrupting, fingers steepled, eyes steady. This is how it usually starts, he said, not with court, with concern. What do I do? Document, limit access, clarify authority. And family? Family doesn't get special exemptions when lines are crossed. I nodded, though my stomach tightened. Saying it out loud made it real. At home, I told my wife what he'd said. She took it in quietly, then reached for a folder she'd kept tucked behind cookbooks. I've been keeping my own notes, she said, just in case. She slid them across the table. Dates matched mine, calls, names, even phrases people had used. I didn't want to worry you, she said, but I didn't like how it felt. Relief and anger tangled in my chest, not because she'd hidden it, because she'd felt she needed to. We sat there, papers spread between us, the house humming with normal sounds. The fridge kicked on, a car passed outside. Life kept moving. We're not crazy, she said. No. And we're not wrong. No. That night, I changed passwords, updated contact lists, drafted a letter to the bank clarifying decision authority. I didn't send it yet. I wanted it right. From the hallway, my wife asked if I wanted soup. I said yes. She stirred the pot and tasted it, added salt, tasted again. The same motions she'd done for years, steady and sure. I placed the documents back into the cabinet, locked it, and slipped the key into my pocket, thinking about the next call I needed to make as I followed the smell into the kitchen. The invitation came by email, brief and formal, asking us to attend a meeting to clarify concerns. No names listed at first, just a time, a place, and a line that suggested our presence was expected, not requested. We arrived together. My wife wore the same coat she'd worn to a dozen appointments without issue. I noticed how tightly she held her bag, not out of fear, but habit. Inside the conference room, 2 chairs faced a long table. My daughter sat on one side, her husband beside her. A woman in a navy suit rose when we entered, extending her hand. I'm Miss Keller. I represent the family's interests. Which family? I asked. She smiled, practiced. Those concerned with well-being. We sat. The air felt procedural, stripped of warmth. Papers lay stacked in front of them, aligned too neatly. This isn't an accusation, my daughter began. It's a conversation. Conversations usually start at home, I said. Her husband cleared his throat. This is about responsibility. Miss Keller opened a folder. There have been reports of confusion, missed details, delayed decisions. Reports from whom? I asked. Family members. Name them. She glanced at my daughter, then back to me. My client. Your client is not my wife, I said, and not me. My wife leaned forward. You're talking about me as if I'm not here. Miss Keller nodded. We want to make sure you're supported. Supported by whom? By people who can step in when needed. Needed by whose standard? The lawyer paused, then continued as if reading off bullet points. Financial decisions, medical consent, long-term planning. Those are already handled, I said. We'd like to review that. Review requires authority, which can be requested and denied. My daughter shifted in her chair. Dad, stop making this difficult.
I didn't start it. Her husband spoke next, voice smooth. You're emotional. That's understandable. I let that pass. We're worried about Mum's safety. My wife straightened. My safety hasn't been threatened. Yet. The word hung there. Miss Keller slid a document across the table. This is a preliminary request for oversight, nothing binding. I didn't touch it.
You've already contacted the bank and the clinic. We acted out of caution, without consent. Consent can be implied when capacity is uncertain. I felt something tighten behind my eyes, but my voice stayed level. You don't get to manufacture uncertainty. That's not what's happening, my daughter said. We just want peace. Peace. Again. Peace doesn't arrive with paperwork, I said. The lawyer closed her folder. Then perhaps we should involve a third party. We already have one, I said. Me. My wife placed her hand over mine, not to stop me, to steady herself. I'm capable, she said. If you're worried, ask me. Don't circle around me. My daughter's eyes flicked away. This isn't personal. Everything about this is personal, my wife replied. Miss Keller gathered the papers, her tone cooling. We'll note your resistance. Note it accurately, I said. Which is? That any attempt to remove my wife's decision-making rights will be challenged. The meeting ended without handshakes. In the hallway, my daughter tried once more. You're pushing us away. You crossed a line, I said. That's different. Her husband added quietly. You'll regret this. We already regret trusting you. We walked out together. In the parking lot, my wife exhaled as if she'd been holding it in for days. I hate being talked about like that. It won't happen again. How do you know? I didn't answer right away. That evening, I called Thomas. They brought counsel, I said. Then it's public now. What does that change? Everything. At home, I drafted letters. One to the bank, one to the clinic. Clear language, firm boundaries. I didn't send them yet. I wanted to read them once more. My wife cooked dinner. She moved with the same rhythm she always had, pausing to taste, adjusting without comment. We ate quietly, not out of defeat, but focus. What happens next? She asked. I stopped waiting. After dishes, I pulled the folder back out, added notes from the meeting, names, phrases. The pen pressed harder than usual. From the living room, my wife asked if I wanted tea. I said yes, eyes still on the page, already deciding which calls I'd make in the morning as the kettle clicked on behind me. Thomas didn't sugarcoat it. He never had. They're testing the perimeter, he said over the phone, seeing how much resistance they'll get before pushing harder. I stood by the kitchen counter, one hand resting on the edge, listening. And if I don't push back? Then the perimeter shrinks, slowly, legally, one form at a time. That sentence stayed with me longer than the call itself. Later that afternoon, I drove to his office. No emergency, no confrontation. Just a quiet meeting between two people who understood how systems worked when left unchecked. He spread documents across the table, not rushing, letting me see the shape of things instead of pointing at conclusions. Right now, authority is assumed, he said, not granted. That's the danger. What's the cleanest way out? You clarify control, formally. You put things where assumptions can't reach. He explained trusts, decision authority, medical directives, not in theory, but in plain terms. What mattered wasn't how much we owned, it was who could speak when it counted. This won't stop them from talking, he added. It will stop them from acting. On the drive home, traffic slowed near a school zone. I watched a crossing guard hold up her hand, cars obeying without question. Authority worked best when it was visible. At home, my wife was on the phone. She hung up when she saw me, a tight smile crossing her face. Another check-in, she said. Someone from church. About what? About whether I'm feeling overwhelmed. And are you? She laughed once, short and dry. I'm overwhelmed by people asking me that. We sat down together at the table. I laid out what Thomas had explained. She listened without interrupting, nodding in places, frowning in others. This means more paperwork, she said. It means fewer surprises. She considered that. And them? They'll notice when doors stop opening. That night, my daughter posted a message online. Nothing direct, nothing that named us. Just a paragraph about caring for aging parents, about how hard it is when denial gets in the way of help. Comments followed quickly. Sympathy, praise, advice. A neighbour texted me. Saw your daughter's post. Hope everything's okay. I didn't respond. The next day, a friend called asking if we wanted company for dinner. Her voice carried concern wrapped in politeness. We're fine, I said. Of course, she replied. Just thought I'd check. By midweek, the tone shifted. People stopped asking how we were and started offering resources. Numbers, names, suggestions we hadn't requested. Someone mentioned a support group, a woman said at the market. Could be helpful. Helpful for what? She hesitated. Transitions. That night, I opened my laptop and drafted the documents Thomas had recommended. Slowly, carefully, each sentence measured, each clause deliberate. Not defensive, just clear. My wife sat across from me, reading her own set. This feels final, she said. It's precise. Same thing sometimes. She signed without shaking. I watched the pen move across the page, steady and sure. That mattered more than the ink. The following morning, the calls escalated. My daughter left 2 voicemails before noon. You're making this public now? She asked in the first. We could have handled this quietly, she said in the second. I didn't call back. Instead, I sent the letters. One to the bank, one to the clinic. Copies to Thomas. Clear instructions. No ambiguity. Authority defined. Access limited. By afternoon, responses started coming in. Acknowledgements, confirmations, polite assurances that procedures would be updated accordingly. My phone buzzed again. You blindsided us, my daughter said when I finally answered. You went around us first. We were trying to help. You were trying to decide. For Mum. Without Mum. Her husband took the phone. This makes things harder than they need to be. It makes them accurate.
You're isolating yourselves. We're setting boundaries. Same difference. Not even close. The line went quiet for a moment. People are asking questions, he said. Let them. That won't end well. It already didn't. That evening, my wife cooked dinner like always. Chopped vegetables, checked the oven, moved with practiced ease. We ate without the television on, the room calm but alert. Do you think they'll stop? She asked. No. Then why do this? I set my fork down. Because safety that depends on silence isn't safety. It's permission. She nodded, absorbing that. After dishes, I stepped into the study and filed the signed documents into a new folder, labelled it clearly, locked the drawer. The click sounded louder than usual. From the hallway, my wife asked if I wanted to sit outside for a bit. I said yes, closed the drawer, and reached for the key, already feeling the weight of the next conversation settling in as I followed her toward the back door. The paperwork began to take over the small hours of the day, the time when no one called and nothing demanded a response. I worked through it slowly, not because it was complicated, but because every detail mattered. A misplaced name or an unchecked box could undo weeks of effort. Thomas reviewed drafts, sent them back with notes in the margins, never raising his voice, never rushing me. Clarity beats urgency, he said during one call. That became the rule. Mornings started with routine. Coffee brewed, mail sorted. My wife read at the table while I skimmed emails that had shifted in tone. Fewer friendly check-ins, more formal language, requests framed as concern but built like probes. A message from the clinic confirmed updated directives. Another from the bank acknowledged new access limits. Each reply felt small on its own, yet together they formed a line that hadn't existed before. My wife noticed the change too. They're quieter, she said one afternoon. They're adjusting. To what? To not being in the middle. She nodded, then went back to trimming herbs for dinner. The sound of the knife stayed steady, unhurried. In the evenings, I met Thomas again, sometimes in his office, sometimes over the phone. We talked through scenarios without dramatizing them. What if they filed something formal? What if they tried to involve another institution? What if they claimed urgency? Let them show their hand, he said. You don't need to chase shadows. Still, shadows showed up. A car idled longer than usual across the street one morning. Maybe coincidence. Maybe not. A neighbour mentioned my daughter had asked questions about property records. Another said she'd been seen at the bank branch near her office. None of it crossed the legal line. That was the point. I didn't confront anyone. I adjusted instead. Changed routines, split responsibilities, made sure no single office held all the information. Redundancy became a form of calm. At home, the atmosphere stayed even. We talked about dinner plans, a book my wife wanted to finish, the weather turning warmer. Ordinary topics carried us through days that felt anything but. One night, as we cleared the table, she asked, "Do you ever feel like we're being watched?" I feel like people are paying attention. Same thing? Not always. She considered that, then smiled faintly. I don't like it. Neither do I. Sleep came in pieces, not from fear, but from calculation. I'd wake up with a phrase in my head, a sentence from a document that needed tightening. I'd jot it down and go back to bed.
A letter arrived, addressed to both of us, marked urgent. Inside was a notice requesting a welfare check, framed as a courtesy. No accusation, no deadline, just an invitation. I handed it to Thomas the next morning. "This is pressure," he said. "Soft pressure. Do we respond?" "Yes, on your terms." He drafted a reply that acknowledged concern without conceding ground. No defensiveness, no explanation, just facts. The reply went out that afternoon. By the end of the week, my daughter tried again. This time she showed up alone. I met her at the door and didn't invite her in. "We need to talk," she said. "We already have." "You're shutting us out." "You're confusing access with entitlement." "Mum needs support." "She has it." "From you?" "That's enough." Her expression hardened. "You think this is control?" "I think this is protection." "From us?" "From overreach." She shook her head, frustrated. "You're making yourself the enemy." "I didn't choose that role." She left without another word. That evening I updated the file again, added dates, noted the visit, cross-referenced calls. The list grew, not out of obsession, but continuity. I wanted a clean line from cause to response. My wife watched from the doorway. "You okay?" she asked. "I am." "You're quieter." "Focused." "That worries me." "It shouldn't." She stepped closer. "I trust you." That mattered more than anything else that day. Later, a notification flashed on my phone. Another post. Another vague message about responsibility and hard choices. Comments followed, some sympathetic, others sharp. I turned the phone face down. "You don't need to see that," my wife said. "I know, but I needed to know how far it was going." Before bed, I locked the cabinet again, checked the drawer, made sure the folder sat where it belonged. The house settled around us, familiar sounds moving through familiar spaces. As I turned off the light, a thought crossed my mind, uninvited and steady. They weren't done yet, and neither was I. I rolled onto my side, already planning the next call I'd make in the morning, listening to my wife's breathing even out beside me as the night carried on. The call came just after lunch, when the house was quiet and the day hadn't decided what it wanted to be yet. I recognized the number immediately, not because it was familiar, but because it wasn't. Institutions always call from numbers you don't know. "Mr. Harris, this is Adult Protective Services. We'd like to speak with you and your wife." I didn't ask why. I already knew. "When?" I said. "Today, if possible." "Where?" "We can come to you." I thanked her and hung up. The room didn't spin. My hands didn't shake. Everything inside me went still, the way it does right before a storm breaks. My wife was in the back room folding clothes. I told her who had called and what they wanted. She sat down on the edge of the bed, a shirt half folded in her hands. "So it's reached that point," she said. "It has." "Are you scared?" I thought about the question longer than it deserved. "I'm angry," I said, "but I'm steady." She nodded, accepting that answer without asking for more. They arrived an hour later. 2 people, professional, courteous, neutral faces trained to reveal nothing. We sat at the dining table again, the same place where the first line had been crossed weeks ago. "We're here because concerns were raised," one of them said, "about decision-making and well-being." "Raised by whom?" my wife asked. "Family members." "Which ones?" They exchanged a glance. "We can't disclose that." I leaned back in my chair. "Then let's talk about facts." They asked questions, routine ones at first. Names, dates, medications, preferences. My wife answered clearly, sometimes with more patience than I expected. When they turned to me, I responded the same way. No defensiveness, no explanations that hadn't been requested. "Have there been moments of confusion?" one asked. "There have been moments of disagreement," I said. "Those aren't the same." "Not unless someone needs them to be." The interview lasted longer than necessary. That was intentional. Pressure works best when it stretches time. When they left, they thanked us for our cooperation and said they'd follow up. The door closed softly behind them. For a while, neither of us spoke. The phone rang again before dinner. This time it was my sister. "What's going on?" she asked, skipping greetings. "What did you hear?" "That you're shutting people out, that your wife isn't doing well, that you're making things harder than they need to be." "From whom?" "Your daughter called me. She sounded worried." I closed my eyes. "Worried about what?" "About losing access." "To what?" Silence. "I don't know why you're being so rigid," she said finally. "Because being flexible got us here. Family shouldn't need paperwork. Family shouldn't need intervention." She sighed. "You're pushing everyone away. I'm standing still. Others are moving around me." The call ended without agreement. By evening, messages stacked up. Friends, relatives, people who meant well and people who didn't. Each one carried a version of the same question, framed differently. "Are you okay? Is she safe? Why won't you let people help?" At dinner, my wife barely ate. She set her fork down and stared at the table. "I feel like I'm on trial," she said. "You're not. Everyone else seems to think I am." I reached for her hand. "Look at me." She did. "You know who you are." "I do. That hasn't changed." She squeezed my fingers, then let go and stood to clear the dishes. The routine steadied her more than words ever could. That night, my daughter showed up unannounced. I opened the door and didn't step aside. "We need to fix this," she said. Her eyes were red. Real tears or frustration, I couldn't tell. "You've made it public," I replied. "Fixing it isn't quiet anymore." "You're humiliating Mum." "You involved strangers. You involved the state. We had no choice." "You always have a choice." "She's declining." "Prove it." She opened her mouth, then closed it. "You're being stubborn." "And being present." Her husband appeared behind her. "This has gone too far," he said. "People are talking. They've been talking for weeks. You're damaging the family. The family was damaged when respect stopped being mutual. You think you're winning? I think I'm protecting my wife. From us? From anyone who confuses concern with control." My daughter's voice broke. "What do you want?" I thought about that for a moment. I want you to stop. Stop what? Acting like authority belongs to whoever speaks the loudest. She shook her head, tears falling now. You're choosing pride over peace. I'm choosing boundaries over erasure. They left without another word. Later, alone in the study, I spread the documents out again. A PS notes, bank letters, legal drafts. The weight of it pressed down hard, not emotionally, but practically. Every move now carried consequence. For the first time, doubt crept in, not about whether I was right, but about whether I could hold the line. I imagined the next steps if this escalated. Hearings, evaluations, public records. I imagined my wife sitting in a room answering questions she didn't deserve. I imagined being told to step aside, temporarily. The thought cut deep. In the living room, the television murmured. My wife sat on the couch, staring at nothing. "Come here," she said when she noticed me. I sat beside her. She rested her head against my shoulder. "If this gets worse," she said quietly, "I don't want you to lose yourself fighting it." "I won't." "Promise me you won't become hard." I didn't answer right away. "I promise I won't become cruel," I said. She nodded, accepting the distinction. We stayed like that for a while, not talking, not planning, just breathing in the same space, holding on to what was still ours. Later, as she got ready for bed, I returned to the study. I stared at the phone on the desk. One call could change everything. Another lawyer, another safeguard, another step forward. Or I could wait, hope things settled, hope pressure eased. I picked up the phone, then set it back down, picked it up again. My thumb hovered over Thomas's name. From the hallway, my wife called out that she was turning in. "I'll be there in a minute," I said. I stood there a moment longer, then pressed call, listening to the ring as I walked toward the bedroom, knowing that silence had already taken enough from us, and that whatever came next would have to meet us where we stood. The confirmation arrived the next morning in an envelope that looked no different from the rest of the mail. No stamp that suggested urgency, no warning. Just paper, folded cleanly, waiting to be read. It was from the clinic director, not a receptionist this time. The tone was formal, careful. They acknowledged a review of my wife's records. They confirmed no diagnosis that impaired judgment. They noted no recommendation for oversight. They apologized for confusion caused by external inquiries, and stated plainly that all prior flags had been removed. I read it twice, then once more, slower. My wife stood at the counter, slicing fruit. I handed her the letter without a word. She scanned it, lips tightening as she reached the last paragraph. "So they found nothing," she said. "Because there was nothing to find." She placed the knife down and let out a breath she'd been holding for days. That matters. It does. Later that afternoon, Thomas called. "I saw the clinic's letter," he said. "That changes the balance." "How much?" "Enough to expose intent." "Explain." "When concern turns into action without evidence, it's no longer concern. It's strategy." I listened as he laid it out, the pattern, the timing, the sequence of calls and posts, how pressure had been applied in places that created noise but no proof, how the absence of a medical basis weakened everything they'd tried to build. They moved before they had ground, he said. That's the weakness. They assumed we wouldn't respond, or that you'd retreat. I didn't answer. He didn't need one. That evening, a second piece fell into place. A notice from the bank confirmed receipt of my clarification letter and added something unexpected. A summary of prior inquiries. Dates, names, requests that hadn't been approved. They documented this, Thomas said when I forwarded it. That's rare. Why does that matter? Because it shows persistence. Or desperation. Both work in your favour. My wife and I spread the papers across the table after dinner. No arguing, no speculation, just lining things up. Clinic, bank, social services, public posts. The order told a story we hadn't seen clearly before. They weren't reacting, she said. They were pushing. And when nothing moved, they pushed somewhere else. She tapped the table lightly. They thought if enough people looked at us sideways, we'd cave, or step aside, or doubt ourselves. That part hurt the most, not because it worked, but because they tried. The next day, my daughter called again. Her voice sounded controlled, too calm for the situation. We need to talk in person. About what? About fixing this before it goes further. Further than what? Lawyers, records, permanent damage. That's already here. Because you escalated. You involved institutions before I did. We were forced. You chose the order. She paused. You think you've won something. I think the truth is catching up. You're misreading things. I don't think I am. Her husband joined the call. Let's meet, he said. Sit down like adults. With or without your lawyer. We haven't decided. Then neither have I. The call ended without agreement, but the urgency had shifted. They weren't speaking from confidence anymore. They were reacting. That night, another post went up, shorter this time, defensive, framed around misunderstanding and heartbreak. Fewer comments, some supportive, others skeptical. A friend texted me. I'm starting to see what you meant. I didn't reply. I didn't need allies yet. I needed clarity. Thomas sent one more email before bed. A draft, not a threat, not a demand, a notice. It outlined facts, corrected the record, set boundaries, invited formal dialogue if they wished to proceed further. You don't send this yet, he wrote. You let them ask for it. I closed the laptop and sat back. The house was quiet. My wife read in the living room, legs tucked under her, glasses perched low. You look different, she said, without looking up. How so? Like you've found your footing. I think I've found theirs. She smiled, small, but real. What happens next? They try to save face. And then? They push one last time. Are you ready for that? I thought about the clinic letter, the bank notice, the careful way Thomas had phrased every response, the way my wife had answered questions without faltering. Yes. Sleep came easier that night, not because the situation was resolved, but because it finally made sense. The next morning, a message waited on my phone. A meeting request. Formal. Scheduled. Their lawyer included this time. I forwarded it to Thomas. "This is it," he wrote back. "Final move." I looked at the calendar, then at my wife across the table, stirring her coffee. "They want to meet," I said. "Where?" "Neutral ground." "Good. You want to come?" She met my eyes. "I've been here the whole time." I nodded and typed my reply. Accepted. Conditions attached. Clear. Limited. When I hit send, my hand didn't hesitate. I set the phone down and reached for my mug, already thinking through the questions I wouldn't answer and the facts I would, listening to the familiar sounds of the house waking up around us, as everything edged closer to the moment we could no longer avoid. The meeting room smelled faintly of coffee and carpet cleaner, neutral territory like we agreed. A long table, 4 chairs on one side, 2 on the other. Thomas sat beside me, a thin folder closed in front of him. My wife chose the seat closest to the door. Not fear, preference. They arrived together, my daughter first, chin lifted, eyes guarded. Her husband followed, shoulders stiff, jaw set. Their attorney came last, already opening a notebook as he sat. No one rushed to speak. That told me more than words would have. "Thank you for coming," their lawyer said finally. "We're hoping to resolve this without escalation." Thomas nodded. "That depends on what you're asking to resolve." My daughter leaned forward. "This whole thing has gone too far." "It did," I said. "The day you stopped asking and started deciding." She flinched, barely. "We were worried." "Worry doesn't explain paperwork." Her husband cleared his throat. "You're acting like we're enemies. You treated us like problems to manage." The attorney raised a hand. "Let's stay focused." He slid a document across the table. "Our clients are concerned about recent changes that limit their ability to support Mrs. Harris." My wife spoke before I could. "I didn't ask for support." The lawyer turned to her. "With respect, these measures were taken because people spoke for me without permission." Silence settled again, heavier this time. The attorney adjusted his glasses. "There have been reports." Thomas leaned forward slightly. "We've reviewed them." "And?" "They lack foundation." The lawyer frowned. "That's your opinion." Thomas opened his folder. "No, that's documentation." He slid copies across the table. Clinic letters, bank notices, time-stamped records of inquiries. Clear, orderly, unembellished. Their lawyer scanned the pages. His expression shifted, subtle but unmistakable. "These show no impairment," he said slowly. "Correct. And these access requests? Made without authorization?" My daughter's voice sharpened. "We were trying to protect her." "From what?" my wife asked. No answer came. The attorney tapped the table. "There's still concern about influence." "Influence isn't illegal," Thomas said. "Coercion is." "Are you accusing my clients of that?" "I'm pointing out a pattern." The room tightened. I felt it in my chest, not as panic, but pressure. This was the moment they'd hoped to avoid. So had I once. My daughter turned to me. "Why are you doing this?" "Because silence stopped being kind. You're tearing the family apart."
You started that when you went around us. Her husband leaned back, arms crossed.
Let's be honest, this is about control.
It always was, I said, just not on our side. He scoffed. You think you can shut us out forever? I met his eyes. I think access isn't a birthright. The lawyer interjected. Let's slow down. He turned to Thomas. What exactly are your clients asking for? Thomas didn't hesitate. That the interference stop, that records be corrected, that future communication go through counsel. And if my clients refuse, then we proceed formally. The lawyer exhaled through his nose. That wouldn't be in anyone's interest. It wasn't in ours either, I said, yet here we are. My daughter's composure cracked. You're humiliating us. You involved strangers. We had to do something. You could have talked to us. You wouldn't listen. You didn't ask. She stood abruptly. This isn't fair. Neither was questioning your mother's competence in public. Her husband stood too. We're not criminals.
I didn't say you were. You're treating us like it, and treating you like adults who crossed a line. The lawyer raised his voice slightly. Everyone sit down. They did, reluctantly. He looked at the papers again, longer this time. Based on what I'm seeing, he said carefully, pursuing this further would be challenging. My daughter stared at him. What does that mean? It means there's insufficient basis for the claims made. So you're taking his side? I'm assessing risk. Her husband slammed his hand on the table. This is bullshit. The lawyer didn't react. Emotional reactions won't help. I felt the weight lift, just a little. Not relief. Recognition. My daughter's eyes filmed, anger mixing with something closer to fear. You planned this, she said to me. I responded. You turned everyone against us. You did that yourself. She shook her head, voice breaking. We were just trying to help. Help doesn't look like this. The lawyer closed his notebook. My recommendation is to stand down. Stand down, her husband snapped. Withdraw requests, correct statements, cease further action. And what do we get? You avoid exposure. The word landed hard. Silence followed. Thick. Final. My wife stood then, smoothing her jacket. I'm done being discussed, she said. I'm going home. I stood with her. Thomas gathered his folder. We'll expect written confirmation by the end of week. The lawyer nodded. Understood. My daughter looked at me, eyes searching for something. Forgiveness, maybe, or permission. I didn't offer either. We walked out together. No speeches, no last words, just the sound of our steps down the hall. Outside, the air felt ordinary. Cars passed. People talked. Life moved on, indifferent to the room we'd left behind. My wife reached for my hand. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For not letting them decide who I am? I squeezed her fingers once. We headed toward the car. I opened the door for her, then circled around to the driver's side. As I started the engine, my phone buzzed. A message from Thomas. Good work. We'll finish the cleanup. I set the phone face down. Traffic waited. A light turned green. I pulled forward, already thinking about dinner, about the quiet of home, about the simple act of closing our door behind us and letting the evening unfold without anyone else speaking for us. The confirmation came 3 days later, not by phone, but by email. Short, formal,
precise. Their attorney acknowledged withdrawal of all prior requests, corrections submitted where statements had been made, and an agreement to cease further contact outside defined legal channels. No apology. No explanation. I didn't expect either. Thomas called that afternoon. "It's done," he said, "at least on paper." "And off paper?" "Consequences tend to follow quietly." He wasn't wrong.
Within a week, the ripples reached places I never touched. My daughter's workplace requested clarification after her public posts were flagged internally. Her husband lost a contract he'd been counting on, and a background check surfaced the pending review he'd helped initiate. Nothing dramatic, nothing headline-worthy, just doors closing where they once opened easily. That was the nature of it. Cold justice didn't announce itself. My sister stopped calling. Friends who had been vocal grew distant, unsure how to re-enter without admitting they'd chosen sides too early. A few reached out privately. "I didn't know the full story," they said. "Now you do." That was enough. At home, the air shifted slowly, like a house settling after a storm. Not lighter, quieter. My wife slept through the night again. She stopped pausing mid-sentence, as if bracing for interruption. Laughter returned in small places, unforced. One morning, she stood at the mirror longer than usual, adjusting her scarf. "I forgot what it feels like to dress without an audience," she said. "You never needed one." "I know, I just forgot." We started walking in the evenings again, no route planned, just movement. Passing familiar streets without wondering who might be watching or talking. The city felt like itself again, indifferent and wide. A letter arrived from Adult Protective Services, closing the inquiry. No findings, no further action. Filed and done. I placed it in the drawer with the others, then locked it away for the last time. That night, my daughter tried once more. A text. No accusation this time. No demand. "I miss you." I stared at the screen longer than I should have. My wife noticed. "You don't owe silence forever," she said carefully. "Just honesty." Honesty would reopen doors. Some doors should stay closed. She was right. I typed a response, erased it, typed another, erased that too. In the end, I wrote nothing. Set the phone down, let the moment pass. The hardest part wasn't cutting contact. It was accepting that love didn't excuse harm, and that protecting someone else didn't require sacrificing myself. I had spent years confusing endurance with virtue. That illusion took longer to dismantle than any legal threat. One afternoon, Thomas stopped by to drop off final documents. He didn't stay long. "You did what most people can't," he said at the door. "You held the line, without burning everything down." It didn't feel strong. Strength rarely does. After he left, I sat at the kitchen table alone for a while, not thinking, just sitting, letting the quiet exist without trying to fill it. My wife joined me later with 2 cups of tea. She slid one toward me and sat down. "Do you regret anything?" she asked. I considered the question carefully. I regret how long it took me to stop confusing peace with permission. She nodded. Me too. We didn't talk about the future in big terms after that. No declarations, no plans built on proving anything. Just decisions made day by day. What to cook, where to go, who to let close. One evening, as we prepared dinner, she asked if I wanted to invite anyone over the following week. Or not, she added. Either way is fine. Let's keep it quiet, I said. I thought you might say that. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It didn't demand explanation. It didn't feel like retreat. It felt earned. Later, after the dishes were done and the house settled into its usual rhythm, I stepped outside alone for a few minutes. No thoughts of strategy, no vigilance, just air and distance. I realized then what my deepest weakness had been all along. I believed that being a good father meant staying reachable at all costs. I was wrong. Being a good man meant knowing when reach became surrender. I went back inside, locked the door behind me, and turned off the light in the hallway. My wife was already in bed, reading. She looked up as I entered. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yes." She smiled and went back to her book. I lay down beside her, listening to the ordinary sounds of the house, pipes settling, a clock ticking. Nothing urgent calling my name. No victory speech. No forgiveness granted. No revenge taken. Just a life returned to its rightful owners, moving forward without permission, without apology, and without anyone else deciding what peace was supposed to look like. 097 247 2056